Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we've got a pretty intriguing what if question, as we ask what if Horus refused the ruinous powers after his wounding by Leman Russ. Now it hopefully goes without saying that we're going to be discussing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe, and in particular the Horus Heresy Series today, so a spoiler warning to begin. But so you have been warned, and with that said, let's waste no time and just jump straight in. Okay, now I know the first thing that leaps to mind when we mention Horus rejecting chaos is obviously the pivotal fallen corruption upon Davin, the moment that began it all. However, there was actually a very real possibility of Horus still rejecting the gods of chaos after that, in the aftermath of his duel with Leman Russ. It was a topic we discussed in our last conversation earlier in the week, so if you missed it, go back and give that a listen first, as you could really label that as the true end of the Horus Lupercal that was. In brief, with Leman Russ successfully wounding Horus with the Emperor's Spear, the power of the Emperor took its effect, revealing the truth of Chaos's manipulation to the Warmaster. Of everyone's manipulation, the Emperors, Malcadors, Erebus and Lorgar's. And in my opinion, this fueled that tiny part of himself, of his soul, that still resisted, ultimately leading to Horus falling into a coma. In the Sons of Horus's desperation to heal their Primarch, Malagurst entered into the warp, where a demon told him his Primarch will die if he continued to resist bowing to the gods. And Malagurst then witnessed this part of Horus upon a reflection of Ulanor, the eve of his appointment as Warmaster, refusing to be a slave, lamenting how everyone had used him, lied to him, declaring chaos false gods. And the Warmaster's famous black armour then returned to its former pure white of the Luna Wolves era, as the sun ascended across a bright white sky. For me, rather than showcasing Horus's demise, it in fact represented his ascendancy, the strength building of that part of his soul, the return of the true Horus triumphing within. However, Malagurst, believing the demon, and thus chaos, felt his Primarch had to submit to survive, and so he stabbed this aspect of the Warmaster in the wound inflicted by the spear, destroying it, whereupon Horus would reawaken, fully committed to the gods of chaos, and once again being fueled by their corruption. But what if Malagurst hadn't done that? Or if he failed somehow? What if Horus was able to continue rejecting the gods, as I believe he was going to do? What would have happened then? Well, obviously this is anyone's guess. We can never truly know. However, one thing that was clear is that this Horus still very much felt betrayed and lied to by his father, the Emperor, and even Malcador, and so it wouldn't be a beautiful, peaceful reunion, the Imperium all coming back together. Far from it. And so I think this Horus would still seek to continue the war, only now actually as the real civil war he claimed it was. No longer mankind versus chaos. But of course therein lies the problem. Chaos is a huge part of the conflict. its presence and influence all over Horus's forces. At this point, Fulgrim has ascended to demonhood. Angron has been enslaved to demonhood. And Lorgar is completely and utterly devoted to the Pantheon. So a reborn Horus, if you will, would have a huge problem on his hands, let alone dealing with the Imperium and everything else. However, Horus is obviously no fool, and he would know this. And he actually could have reawakened in the best situation to deal with it, and quickly. At this point in the lore, his own forces and brothers at least were all heading to Ulanor for the final meeting and then push upon Terra. Lorgar had enslaved Fulgrim in his secret attempt at taking power from the Warmaster, and Perturabo had captured Angron, dragging the Weld Eaters in tow. Let's make no bones about it, the Sons of Horus Legion would have been elated to have their true Primarch back. His descending to the influence of the warp and change in attitude had only ever been a problem, as could be seen with his deteriorating relationship with Abaddon. So having Horus truly back, informing his sons he had seen through the lies and cast out their influence, would have immediately had his legion back to doing what they do best, being Astartes and Astartes alone. And love them or hate them, the Sons of Horus deserved their reputation. They were elite. And I also think Horus would have reached out and contacted the brothers he knew were not corrupted or fallen, namely Perturabo, Magnus, Mortarion, and Omegon, who of course he believed was Alpharius, with the real Alpharius falling to Rogol by this point. Having Lupercal back to the man he was would have been a huge boost to all of these Primarchs, leaving aside Omegon for the moment. Mortarion and Perturabo, who despised the warp and loved Horus, would have immediately felt a huge morale boost, and it honestly could have perhaps been enough to truly get Magnus on side, torn in his opinion as he was. Knowing Horus had cast out the warp was once again the Horus of old, the brother he loved, no longer the monster who manipulated Russ into burning Prospero. I honestly think it would have been very healing for Magnus, hearing his brother be truly regretful. Because we really need to remember here how loved Horus was. It got lost a lot as the Heresy series went on, especially with the Siege of Terra, where Sanguinius is being built up for his final sacrifice. But the truth is, it was always Horus Lupercal who was the brightest, the most loved, who had the easy charisma. That was why he was Warmaster. And so Magnus and the Thousand Sons would have definitely been committed to the cause with that Lupercal back. And so Horus, at a minimum, has the powerhouses of the Death Guard and the Iron Warriors, as well as the much desired crown jewel of the Thousand Sons, who punched well above their weight. I don't know how Omegon would react, because obviously the twins turned for the long victory, the true defeat of chaos, by having Horus win. However, Omegon then appeared to be secretly aiding the Imperium, so it's all a bit of a mystery. We know he arrived at Ulanor and withdrew the Alpha Legion away from Horus's final assault, but maybe were the Horus of old there? He might not have. Horus may well have been able to convince him to remain true. We really need to learn more of how Omegon felt about things, about his brothers, to match Alfarius, because as much as they may have been twins, they clearly had differing opinions on some important things. So, I don't know, maybe we'll leave him and the Alpha Legion as a wild card for now. But regardless, we've got Horus Lupercal, Mortarion, Perturabo, and Magnus the Red on side. Now, as for Lorgar, he would have surely been able to tell there was something different about Horus as soon as he saw him. And I think Horus would have attempted to talk to Lorgar, but in private. Or at least he wouldn't have descended to the surface of Ulanor to face Lorgar and the demon Fulgrim without backup. And I think he'd try to convince him into leaving his worship of the false gods behind. That there are no gods. Which probably would be a short conversation, with Lorgar being a lost cause. But I do think Horus would try, because regardless of his flaws, he truly did love his brothers. And so there's a good chance it would have ended in a fight. If it did, Lorgar's far more powerful than he used to be at this point, but I still can't see him beating Horus Lupercal. And as I said earlier, I think Horus would have been smart enough to stack the odds against Lorgar and his legion. So there's a real possibility here. Horus would have crushed Lorgar and the Wordbearers right there and then. I mean, they were the reason for his corruption in the first place, which I don't think Horus would have looked on too kindly. The same could then be said for Fulgrim and the Emperor's children. As close as Horus and Fulgrim once were, Fulgrim's ascendancy to demonhood really rules out any chance of Fulgrim not siding with Chaos, for obvious reasons. And so Horus would have had no choice but to banish him. There could possibly be an offer made to the Emperor's children to join him, forsake the corruption that was spreading amongst their legion, which some of them may have taken. But I think on the whole, the degeneration is too set in by now amongst the majority of their legion. And so Horus would sadly be forced to crush them too. Angron would be much the same. However, the World Eater's Legion, I think maybe Horus would have kept around to use, just as the wrecking ball they are to throw at the Emperor's loyal legions. However, they too are beginning to pass beyond the point of no return too. So maybe not. He may be forced into eradicating the World Eaters too. Regardless, after this brief inter-traitor conflict, I think the returned Horus Lupercal would emerge with a solid, unified force. One that is stronger for exercising the taint, rebuilding the trust between him and his brothers, but weaker for losing the power Chaos provided, as well as being forced to eradicate the Wordbearers, Emperor's children, and possibly World Eaters. And so that definitely makes his war against the Imperium harder. Arguably unwinnable. I would say definitely unwinnable when it comes to facing the Emperor, but I think maybe that does Magnus an injustice. Yes, the Emperor is most likely vastly more powerful than Magnus, but combined in a fight with the other traitor Primarchs, they may have been able to take out the Emperor. However, the chances of them getting to that point are extremely unlikely. And so I did consider Horus suing for peace, perhaps declaring his territory as an annexed Lupercal Imperium. However, that's just not an option. It has to end with the Emperor's death. But I just can't see how he could win. With him defying the gods, you would expect the Ruin Storm to shatter, and that then frees up Guilliman and El'Jonson, two of the strongest legions remaining, especially Guilliman's. Horus is clever, brilliant as a commander. If anyone could pull off a victory, it's him. But for me, if his victory before relied on Guilliman being stalled, kept away, now, with a weaker force at his disposal, and with Guilliman added to Rogal's forces, let alone El'Jonson, I just don't see how he can come away with a victory. I think the Ruin Storm breaking, Guilliman establishing contact with Rogal, means an Imperium offensive, and it would be a brutal, hard-fought war, most likely with Horus appealing his case to his loyal brothers, but I think it would fall on deaf ears, resulting in other Primarchs surely meeting their end, but ultimately, surely, ending in an Imperium victory. But as always everyone, what do you think? What do you think would transpire with a true Horus Lupercal return after his wounding by the Emperor's Spear? What do you think a Horus Lupercal would do in a war against the ruinous powers, but also still opposed to the Emperor? As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.